One minute. I'll get up there. Tell me when you want to start. Good to start now. At this time, I'll call this meeting of the South Central Pennsylvania Genealogical Society to order. It's nice to be back at our regular home, so to speak. This is the first time since November. We had several Zoom meetings in between, and in January we didn't have a meeting. So my name is Richard Conkle. I'm the president of the society. And at this time, I think I will ask our secretary, Jerry, to read the minutes from the last meeting. Jerry Smith. Oh, well, whoever has minutes. No one has minutes. Well, we will dispense with the reading of the minutes until probably not next month, probably June. So at this time, our treasurer, Margaret Burke, will give us a treasurer's report.
Okay, this treasurer's report is for February and March 2021. Balance at February 1st was $19,039.92. Receipts in February, membership renewals, $100, new, $25, publication sales, $345. For total receipts in February, $470. There were no receipts for March. Disbursements, there were no disbursements for February. Disbursements for March were postal connections, the January, February, March newsletter, $210. Pennsylvania sales tax for the period of July 1st through December 31st of 2020, $6.89. And to the postal USPS, miscellaneous publication orders mailing, $74.05 for a total disbursements in March of $290.94. The cash balance at March 31st, 2021 is $19,218.98. The membership report, we have 176 memberships. 19 of those are families, so when you add the extra person, we have a total of 195 persons. We had 2 new members in 2021, and for the year, being July 1st through June 30th of this year, 11 a total. Renewals, since our newsletter went out in February or March, when it went out, renewals that have come in are 30. That's it.
Thank you, Margaret. That report will be filed for audit. This time I would ask Nicole Smith from the York County History Center to give us a report from the library and the History Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today and for joining us online. Let's see. All of our programs will continue to be recorded and available online if you go to the York County History Center YouTube channel. This particular program is also being live streamed on our Facebook page. Just a couple announcements before we get started. The York County History Center is open to the public as of April 1st. Reservation is required for the museums and for the library and archives. Coming up, we have some really interesting programs. On the third Thursday of the month, April 15th, we have a program called From Slavery at Hampton Plantation, Maryland to Freedom in York, PA. That's at 7 o'clock, and it's by Cheryl LaRoche, PhD of the University of Maryland. On April 21st is our Civil War Roundtable. and Bob Bowser will present The Untold Story of Ned Spangler. On April 28th, the York Civil War Roundtable will be online only. On April 28th, all vets will be starting their program for the year with Buck Buchanan, a Vietnam vet, and Huey Pilot. That will be in person and online. And then on May 7th, we have Give Local York, which is our York County fundraising event for nonprofits. Please take a look. There'll be numerous offerings by the History Center and others online. So thank you very much. Please visit our website, yorkhistorycenter.org, for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. At this time, I'll have our Vice President, Jonathan Stair, announce today's speaker and also give us information about our upcoming meetings.
Thank you, Richard. Next month, May the 2nd, will be an off-site meeting. We will be having a tour of the Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad Village down at Muddy Creek Forks. For those of you who are watching online, the time of that will be 2:30 p.m. So we're starting the program at 2:30. The group will be broken into smaller sections for tours of the site, which will last approximately 50 minutes. And then there will be a short train ride along with the tours of the structures. Please try to arrive promptly because we need to get an accurate count. We're paying for this per person, so we need to know how many people that we have there. Please come because to those who are coming, it's free. Our board of directors has decided to pay the fee, and therefore you can enjoy an afternoon down at Muddy Creek Forks. The whole program itself, with the tours and the train ride and so forth, they estimate will last about 2 hours. Some of the facilities are handicapped accessible, some are not. So you can enjoy the grounds if you have mobility issues, but you may have some trouble accessing. I think they said there are 3 steps to go up to get into the mill. There is a ramp to get into the general store, but there may be some other things that you may not be able to access if you have trouble walking or if you're in a wheelchair. But we'll try to accommodate as best we can, given the limitations of the site there. If you think you're going to go to Muddy Creek Forks, please let me know. They told me that if our group is larger than 25, they want to bring in some additional volunteers to help with the tours and so forth. So please contact us if you think you're going to be there. And if we see the numbers getting over 25, I'll let them know that. Otherwise, just show up on that afternoon. Also, be prepared to wear a mask when you're inside the buildings, and that should be obvious by now. That's going to be part of that as well. If you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me or the society, and we'll be glad to try to get answers for you. But it should be an enjoyable and pleasant afternoon down there at Muddy Creek Forks. I'm hoping the weather's better than it is today, but we have a nice, bright, sunshiny day. The final program of this program year will be June 13th, and we're going to have a Henry James Young program, Henry James Young Award program. We do not have a nominee this year, so our president, Richard Kunkel, will be talking about who Henry James Young was, what the award is all about, who are some of the past award recipients, and we're going to try to encourage people to submit nominations for the Henry James Young Award. I also wanted to mention a few things that are coming up next program year. I'm looking well into 2022. On August 29th, which will be our first program of the next program year, Aaron McWilliams from the Pennsylvania State Archives will be here. He's going to be talking about the online resources of the Pennsylvania State Archives. If you were watching our program last month, the state archivist talked about their new initiatives, the things that they're putting online. Aaron's going to show us how to actually find those things, where they have them, and how to use them. So this is kind of the practical side of what the state archivist was talking about last month. January 2nd of 2022 will be Mark Schermeyer, a local architect, talking about dental, family, and dental structures here in York County. February the 6th will be Chip Kaufman, who's a local professor, whose expertise in linguistics. He's going to talk about the history of Celtic languages and their expressions in Pennsylvania. And I told him that since we had Welsh and Scotch Irish here, hopefully we'll cover some of that and other things. On March the 6th, we're going to have a special treat. A local gunsmith, Brad Ending from Helena, is going to come and talk to us about the history and manufacture of Pennsylvania long rifles. So if you like artifacts, you like things, this will be a good program for you. And on May the 1st of next year, Tyler Stump from the Pennsylvania State Archives will be coming and talking about the history and records of Pennsylvania's mental health hospitals. So I asked him to particularly focus on Harrisburg State Hospital, since that's where most of the people from York County went. And he has a great familiarity with those records, particularly because he's the archivist who's primarily in charge of seeing that they get from the institutions to the state archives. And he'll tell you all about what has come. If you want to get a little taste of what he's into, in the most recent issue of Pennsylvania History, he had a very lengthy and interesting article about Farview State Hospital, which was the state's facility for the criminally insane. And he does a very good job of summarizing how Pennsylvania handled mental health, particularly in the 19th and late 20th centuries. So, today our speaker is Cara Fultry Curtis, and most of us know her as the director of the Library and Archives of Cumberland County Historical Society, and that's where I've encountered her. And also, a couple years ago, she was one of the moving factors behind a very large and valuable conference on doing research in Cumberland County. I thought it was Mother Cumberland. I'm not sure if that's the name of the conference or not, but a lot of us were there speaking, and she had people from different archives talking about the things. But she's been a mover and shaker in things in Cumberland County. She has a master's degree in applied history from Shippensburg University and a master's in library and information science from the University of Pittsburgh. And if you have any contact with the Cumberland County Historical Society, you probably eventually have some contact with Cara. So without further ado, we're going to have Cara come tell us about genealogical research in Cumberland County.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, especially since we were supposed to do this last year, so had extra time to think about it. And when I first started thinking about this program, my initial thought was, well, a lot of the records are going to be pretty similar, at least the county-generated records. This part of the state is doing things around the same time. But then I sat on this a lot longer, and I came up with some things to share, and hopefully some things that will be useful today. And hopefully I don't turn on too long, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. So first thing first, don't know how well you can see this map. I love this map. It's from 1775, and you get this a little bit in South Bend and York and Adams. Of course, York breaks before Cumberland in 1749, and Adams subsequently breaks from York. Cumberland County went west basically to Pittsburgh and north into Center County. So hence the name Mother Cumberland. And if you can see, so modern day Cumberland County is right here. We've got just York County there. Except Cumberland County is way up here. So to give you a sense, and this map has been slightly altered. We did gray or green in the area that is Cumberland County to give that perspective. So the further you are away from modern day Cumberland County, the harder it is to find those records. Easier to not be on tax records. There aren't really churches. There's definitely no newspapers. So the first newspaper for west of the Susquehanna is the Carlisle Gazette or Times Gazette. It's the same paper. And that's 1785. So the further that you get, the more complicated it is until more people start moving into those areas. Obviously, some news accounts are making their way back to Philadelphia. So the Pennsylvania Gazette is a wonderful resource. And we do sneak in there occasionally, especially when there are events of violence or runaways. Some of the other things do make their way, but you're not getting the standard death notices or anything like that, really. So useful for some things, not useful in other ways we're used to using newspapers today. So starting even before the Revolution, these counties start breaking off. Bedford's first in 1771, and of course, a big chunk of other counties break off from Bedford further west. Franklin County is in 1784, and Perry County is our friend the longest, and gives us our modern day boundaries, but they break a little over 200 years ago, they break in 1820. So we get a lot of people dealing in Perry County just because they were part of us for so long, Franklin as well. And also just because in York, just because people aren't bound by arbitrary municipality lines, so they cross over to work or go to church or play or to find love. So we get a lot of people that need to go back and forth. My family, of course, is moving back and forth between Franklin and Cumberland, and on the other side, Perry and Cumberland. So don't forget, if you live in a boundary region, to look in multiple places. So as far as government issued records, things like Adams would be part of York until they split. All of the other records are going to be part of Cumberland County until they split. So tax records, deeds, wills are all going to be part of Cumberland County until those counties subsequently split. We do not tend to have church records for those areas, even if that church existed before the split. They tend to be in the county historical societies or genealogical libraries in those counties. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, we don't have extensive collections of other records for the counties outside of the government issued ones. And this is what I call my Bible. And this is, I'm sorry, it's a little blurry, but you can find this online. We have a copy of it in the library. I pull this regularly, especially when we're dealing with these splits. And it's so nicely, and I have 2 pages scanned out here that I'll share with you. But they also do a little bit on Revolutionary War soldiers and militias, and also Presbyterian churches are in there. Presbyterians, the Scotch Irish, as was mentioned a few minutes ago, very much the earliest Western settlers in Cumberland County, even though Carlisle was laid out by the Penn family. The strongest movement in that earliest wave was definitely Scotch Irish Presbyterians, and then within a few decades, you get Pennsylvania Dutch coming in as well. So they have these township maps on the decade for the early time period, and on it you'll see different marks for what the county is, and you'll have the township abbreviations there. There is a key, so you don't necessarily know what this means, but WP is West Pennsboro, for example. MI is Middleton before noticing splits. You get a sense of that going forward and as these splits are happening. And it also has, I love these pages. They do this, he does this for each county that splits off. So at the very top, you get information about a split. Some of these counties split from more than one county, so that can be very helpful because you might need to look in multiple places for records as the county becomes part of another county before its final county. I lovingly say someone could have lived in the same house their entire life, but have lived in multiple townships and maybe different counties. So being aware of these dates is incredibly important as you're looking at the records, because you might need to, when you're looking at tax records, of course, they're by township. So you might need to be switching townships, even though they might not have moved, municipalities have subdivided. So time period, so shortly after Cumberland County is created in 1750, there are 2 counties that create modern day Perry, and then you don't see that, you can see this on the map where they break out of, but in here you just know which townships break from which townships. In some cases, like in Madison here, it's forming out of 2 different townships, and of course the dates, of course it further subdivides, but this row here is the modern day townships for Perry County. There's a page like this for each of the counties, so especially with some of the counties I'm not as familiar with, this book is incredibly helpful. Even for Cumberland County, I can't remember the date every township was formed because there's a lot of them. So having this is incredibly helpful. So you can use it as a reference. So we have this. If you come to the library, it's there. You can also, it's not an overly, at least it didn't used to be an overly expensive book. So if you have family in Cumberland County, it could be useful. So there there are a bunch of places in Cumberland County to do research. So depending on where your ancestors were living, trying some of these smaller institutions could be very helpful. So there's us, which we cover the whole county, but then we have a lot of history and then more than any one person can hold. So we are glad to partner and work with these institutions. They are their own entities, so we have no oversight over them. Shippensburg is probably one of the older ones. It was formed in 1945. They have, and all these, I should say, are some are volunteer run, some have some paid staff, some of their websites. But if you want to go, it's worth calling or emailing them because I'm not sure what their status of opening is at the moment. I know some have appointments, but it's always worth checking since nothing's quite normal yet. But I'm sure they'd be willing to help if they can. So they do collect and do a lot of genealogical work there, and they collect deeds, letters, maps, promotional material, all sorts of things. They do a lot of great programs as well. So they're a great institution in Shippensburg. And they also, another way of supporting these institutions, if you don't have to necessarily be a member, is just following their Facebook pages and things like that and seeing what they're up to. So that's part of their radar there in Shippensburg. Shippensburg also benefits from being so close to the university, where they have the master's program in applied history. So they get a lot of great interns working on different programs and indices and things like that. So they get a real benefit from all of those grad students trying to learn more about the field and make things accessible. So that's kind of unique to them. I'm just kind of working my way across the county. So we have Newville, and this one's founded in 1966. And of course, also to protect and preserve the history of Newville. And I will say Shippensburg and Newville are the boroughs and also the surrounding region. So if they're in that general area, it might be worth looking at them, even if they're not living in the boroughs themselves. So they also have a lot of collections and photographs and things of that nature. The next one is pretty unique. And this is more of a museum association, but they do have archival records as well. And their volunteer staff do a lot of research and do publications, and so they're very active. They are based more in preserving buildings, and they started that in 1975 with the station master's house, and they have acquired several more buildings. So they're probably the most building-rich institution in the region. A lot to do with the railroad industry there, but you also have Frankenberger Tavern there as well, which was relocated to its current location. And so they support that, and they do tavern dinners and things there, at least during a normal time. They also have a Facebook page. So the big news is a few years ago, the house next to Frankenberger Tavern was set on fire by an arsonist and it had to come down. So they're now making a pocket park for the tavern. So it's unfortunate that the house was lost, but they're making this nice use for it. We'll have to go with the tavern. Shiremanstown Historical Society. So this is the newest one. It's only been around for about 10 years. So they're still trying to figure themselves out, but they're working on collecting oral histories and a variety of things. So they know these areas better than most people. So they're worth contacting if you have family in those areas, because they know people, they know records, they know the area, they know the landscape. So reaching out to them can be very helpful. The Historical Society of East Pennsboro is another all-volunteer-run organization. They do a lot with the railroads, so if you like railroads, another institution to check out. And so they work to educate the public and kind of instill that sense of place. They're big news, and they've been in the news a lot recently. If you watch local news, because of this gem, which is the Enola Miller house. So this is the house where Enola Miller was raised, and that is, of course, why we have Enola. It was named for her, and this house was threatened by development, like so much in this area is. And it just went on a little journey. You can see on their Facebook page, they've had updates, but this is older. So when it was raised up before it moved, it has now settled into its new location, thankfully, safely. But there's another house that's about to be moved in Cumberland County that's older than this, the Junkin House. So hope that that goes smoothly as well. So lots of exciting things happening as far as history and preservation happening in the county. And then we have the West Shore Historical Society. And so what is the West Shore? In this case, they focus on Hamden and Lower Allen townships and the boroughs of Lemoyne and Warm-Leesburg. And so you're doing a lot of the same types of things, also all volunteer run, also into the railroad, not surprisingly, for that area. And they also have a Facebook page that shares a lot of photos. So it's fun to see all of that. I think it's fun also because you can do genealogy and just have the dates and who's like after, but I like to see more about the area and what's the sense of place and what did it look like, what was the atmosphere. So seeing some of these photos or descriptions can provide fuller details of what our ancestors' life might be like. And then there's a few other institutions that could be helpful, considering if your ancestors went on to higher education. So we do have the Dickinson College archives, which are fabulous, and Shiremanstown also fabulous. So they have records on their former students, and then they also have records on what the towns were like during certain time periods. They also, if you're interested in other topics of history, also worth looking into Dickinson. And I, the Historic Society, have partnered with some other institutions on an Indian School Digital Resource Center. So if that part of American history interests you, they've been digitizing millions of records seemingly. So lots of other exciting things here if you're interested in other aspects of global history. But if your ancestor went to school, it might be worth checking into these institutions as well, or higher education. And then one other I want to mention is Messiah, which is now University, formerly Messiah College. Of course, they have the same type of student archives and kind of college archives. I pulled them out separately because they are also a regional archives for the Brethren in Christ Church. So that might not be as well known, it's tucked in there. So if your family is part of that religious tradition, it may be worth reaching out to them for that as well. And so that's a strong German religious tradition that you see, at least in Cumberland County, quite frequently. And full spectrum from plain brother to more modern. And then lastly, happens to be unique to us. It's obviously much broader. It's a great place. They have a free museum and a free walking trail. So it's a great place to go if you're ever in the area, just for a fun thing to do. But it grows out of the Military History Institute, which used to be in the Carlisle Barracks. It's now off of the barracks, so you don't need to go through that security to get on the barracks to use their resources. Their mission is to tell the story of the Army, one soldier at a time. So not the Army's history, but rather the soldiers. So if your ancestor was in the Army, they may have something, or they may have some tools to tell you how to find certain things, since that's the type of records they deal in every day. So they have a lot more expertise and looking for those records than other people just because of what they're doing. And they're an interesting mix of a foundation and federally run. So yeah, they're used to those federal records, which we don't have at CCHS, obviously. So this is what the Historical Society looks like today. And so our original building is here, and it was built in 1881. We're founded in 1874. So we're one of the older societies in the state. We were founded as the Hamilton Library by James Hamilton Jr. Left us this piece of land in his will. It was never a house that anyone lived in. It was built to be this institution, more of a library originally, but we didn't have a lot of money for books. And then our public library was founded not so long after us, and they had a larger endowment for books. So our very wise leadership at the time, kind of turn of the century, veered us into doing historical topics, which is something we were already doing, but grew that into what we are today. And we've never been the Carlisle Historical Society. You may hear that. Never been that. We've always been broader. We became the official county historical society in the 70s when we had the county records. at the Historical Society. We no longer have the county records at the Historical Society outside of microfilm, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. So just hitting kind of low-hanging fruit and things that are unique to us, because genealogy has changed so much, even my 12 years at the society. More and more people have access to the census at home. You don't need to come see us to use it. We do have it on microfilm, but we also have an ancestry account, library account. But people need to use us for that less and less, as these things are more accessible in a variety of ways. So one of the things we do have, and this is normally one of the things I pull out first for anyone that comes into your genealogical research, is the genealogy files. So that full walkway there, back into our work room, are what we call genealogy files. So every time we've done research for someone over the years, added into a file, and we have about 2,400 of those. They're not all created equal. Some are very slim, and then you get people like the Millers, and there might be 3 folders of Millers, because that's like Smiths in Cumberland County. So could be more of a work to go through. Sometimes it's other branches of the same family. Just depends. We know things are inaccurate in there, just as people have learned things over time. But there's a lot of good information, so you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. So it's a great starting point. So we have the genealogy files. And then we have a set of blue folders that we call Shaman files for Mary Lou Shaman, who is an excellent local author, historian, one of my resident experts that I go to when I have a question on early Cumberland County. And so she did work as a genealogist for a while, and we have her files, and there are just under 300 of those. And then we also have what we call flower files for Lenore Flower. And Lenore Flower was an amazing woman who was an author, historian, genealogist, all the things. She was a mover and shaker. And she was sent a lot of these genealogical questions in the mid-20th century. She was very active in the local DAR. So we have over 1,200 of her genealogy files. And so she also did some traveling. So sometimes you see things for other counties in there, which you don't see in ours typically. She's the queen of using scrap paper, and there's lots of onion skin paper in there. And I love them anyway. So they're also, so sometimes we'll have all 3 foreign names. Sometimes there's none. There's none for my maiden name. It doesn't mean anything. It just, we haven't actively had someone request to do research on those names yet. So it's a great starting point, and something that is easily available to people as they come in. We also have what I'm calling publications in quotes. So people compile these genealogies, and sometimes they gift them to us. So some of them are actually published, and you might find them in other libraries. They may not be unique to us. And then they come in a variety of other forms, of 3-ring binders and foil bound. You can see there are all sorts of different things. Once again, these are not all created equal. Some are far better than others, especially the older ones, especially from the turn of the 20th century. They don't like to source anything. So where did they find this information? No idea. But it can be a starting point or a scrap of information that maybe could be helpful as you're digging and maybe hitting walls, seeing something that maybe you can work to verify or prove wrong could be useful. And we have over 1,800 of those records in the library collection. We have additional genealogy files that are just throughout the archival collection, because as they come in, they're all over the place, they're not cataloged together. So there are other genealogy files available as well. Another thing that is unique to us, and this can be hard to see, we have our church and cemetery records index. And this is over 900 sources indexed, and there are over 1 million name entries in it. This was something that they started in the 90s, and we're like, it'll take a few years. It's still ongoing, although it has taken a pause. The 2 men that started both passed away, so we're kind of figuring out where we want to go with it. So we're not actively working on it at the moment, but there's definitely more records to go into it. So we're kind of figuring out where we want to take it. But we still use this heavily. So the way it is in this format, there's 2 sections of data on each page. So you'll have a name, the year an event happened, a page number, an index reference number, and a tape code. And there's of course a key to the code codes, but and obviously some people are in here more than once. So I don't want to say a million different names, but just entries. And if you'll see Geraldine Gagey, and it's a B and an O in the same book on the same page. Poor Geraldine died as a baby. So this is most likely a tombstone or a death record that happened at a church, that you're getting that lifespan in the same book on the same page. So knowing that can be helpful. And this marriage, his parent as his spouse, some of the major ones that people are looking for. And this is also a great resource for us when people ask us, like, I'm doing research on, the Pancake family. And we can look into this and say, ooh, there are no entries. Doesn't mean they're not here, but they probably weren't there very long. So this can just give us a sense of if the family was here, if we're not as familiar with the names. This obviously is not records for all the churches that ever existed in Cumberland County, or all of the records that an individual church created, because they're all wholes. But it still is incredibly helpful. It's also helpful if you don't know which church they went to, or even religious tradition they were a part of. It also, of course, is cemetery. So we have those transcriptions of cemeteries. Personal nowadays, we find a lot of that on Find a Grave. Find a Grave also not perfect. And some of these cemeteries have been done multiple times, so you'll notice things that are missing, modern, either the stones have disappeared or other things have happened, or some of those tiny farm cemeteries we do have some information on, so that can be very helpful. And some of those, the information is not on Find a Grave. And then we have a variety of other indices. So we keep this beautiful old card catalog in the library because it has index information in it. On these cards, people went and typed up or hand wrote. So we have the newspaper surname catalog from 1785 to 1870. And there's one from 1966. Over here. We also have binders of obituary information and other records as well. Will abstracts, other things that can be helpful to know where to look. So very, very helpful things, especially since there aren't government records for a lot this time period as far as birth, marriages, and deaths. So hoping for a church record, hoping for a newspaper record, since there are no official vital statistics. So these are very helpful, although in the past few years, newspapers.com has added the Sentinel. So if you have a subscription to that database, do some searching. Genealogy Bank, which is another paid subscription, has access to the Carlisle Gazette and some of the earlier papers. Obviously, the searching is as good as the OCR, what the transcription of it is. So it easily can miss things that you know should be there. But some of those newspapers are searchable in ways they never have been before. They're not available in the library version of the database, so it has to be single user. But there's normally free trials and things, so you can or keep it for a few months and do all your research. And if you don't want to keep paying all the subscriptions for all of these databases, but that has been something that's been incredibly useful and just opened up research, historic research and genealogy research. We have an amazing photograph collection. So this is the Goodyear family reunion in Boiling Springs. So we probably have about 5 million images. Some are identified, some aren't. Earliest ones really starting in the 1860s. So we may have pictures of your family, some maybe not identifying, but also just getting a sense of, a sense of place. So this is Boiling Springs, and the main ironworks there, circa 1875. So I mean, you can literally, and anyway, sit and just look at photos for hours and kind of go down rabbit holes because they're just beautiful. And there a number of them are scanned, about 50,000, 60,000 are scanned in our computer catalog. A lot more entries are there. We have a fabulous photo curator named Richard Tritt, who knows the collection incredibly well, so he's very helpful if you have any photographic questions. So yeah, new exciting, discoveries and other questions every day. Other types of files that you could be using, we have the 1858, the 1872 Atlas of Cumberland County. Of course, those county atlases were very popular during that time, so we have two. This is a section of the 1858 Atlas for Carlisle. There's a corresponding page that tells you who's living on those plots. Architectural surveys, we do have city directories, the tavern book, which is helpful to people, and other CCHS publications could be useful depending on what you're looking at. And I wanted to dwell on this series a little bit, and this also takes us to state records. So we have this really two series, but it's the first family books of Cumberland County, and it was led by Hayes Eshelman and helped by Paul Varner, and then Chris Farmer did Perry County. And there was already some information for Perry County, so Paul wasn't going to do it, and then I helped him convince his son that it would be great if someone did Perry County. So we now have Perry County. So all of the highlighted parts are books that are done. So we are at 49 volumes, and then there's 11 for Perry County, but all of Perry County is done. This is still a work in progress, but all of modern day Cumberland County, Franklin, Fulton are complete. And what this gives you is they spent hours going through all those historic property records, because of course you had to acquire land through the Penn family or the common law, depending on the time period, before you get that patent. Once that you have that last step, that patent, the first deed, then the sale is recorded at the local level. So a lot of people are coming into this area before that happens. So this is so incredibly helpful, and we use this regularly. This is from our store page. So we do have a combined index to all 49 volumes, and there's a separate index for the 11 volumes of Perry County. Each volume has its own index, but if you don't want to look through an index at the back of every volume of 49, this is incredibly helpful. So this is what the index looks like. You get, of course, the name. This is typically the survey number in the copied survey books at the state. And then this is the number for the book. And this is arbitrary. The authors needed this number. The other thing that's important to note, and this confuses people when they first see it, is the asterisk. That denotes that they are a neighbor. So on the survey, they might not be the original owner of that piece of land. They moved in, so if you look at that survey number and then look at the map, you can figure out which parcel of land they lived on. So a lot of times people are trying to figure out where their ancestors were living within Cumberland County, and this is incredibly useful. Yes?
You sell the cumulative indexes as well as the individual books.
The cumulative index is just online. That's free. It's free.
It's yours.
Yeah, but it's online. Anyone can just access it. The volumes each in the book has that index for that volume, and so the book comes with the map. It's I think it's $18, but you get the book and the map together.
I'm familiar with the books.
Yes, yeah.
When were these done?
What?
When were they?
They're a work in progress.
Okay.
The Cara County was done, I think, 2 years ago. About that, they started probably.
It started in the 80s.
Yeah.
Or Hayes Eshelman
When it started,
in the 80s.
yeah. But it really picked up. I mean, they had already done a fair chunk, they were going back and forth between Cumberland and Franklin. Hayes Eshelman's a Shippensburg man, so he had interest in both. So they were kind of going back and forth. Neither of those counties were done when I started, but they were probably easily 10 volumes in by the time I started in 2008. But this built off the work that Hayes Eshelman also wrote a variety of books on Forbes expedition and things like that. So he had an interest in kind of following the Forbes trail. So that was all part of his work. And then I did look up, so this is the survey book for Ms. Reynolds. And then, so they diligently take a modern day quadrangle and draw, overlay all of those old surveys onto, I apologize, this isn't the best scan, but I've highlighted, so we want that S166 and that survey number. The page in the book would also give a little more information, not necessarily a ton, it's just some pieces of land are more complicated, so you get more information, but you can see where it is. So this is kind of just southwest of Shippensburg. The Shippensburg's up here. This is that parcel of land where Ms. Reynolds was living. So I love these maps, and we use them a lot. And if you get to, and I always get to the land records, the state, like just Googling PA state land records. And you get there and you can look for the copied survey books there. But there are literally tens of thousands of pages of these surveys, and they're in no particular order as far as land. So just being able to go to a particular survey is so incredibly helpful. And then government records. So a few years ago, the county government started their own archival facility, and they moved the records out of the historical society. We were never going to have the capacity to hold all of their records, and they wanted them all in one place. And so it's a small warehouse, not a big warehouse, small warehouse. It looks tiny compared to the warehouses that are around it. And they're doing great things out there. Some things are still at the courthouse, and you can do deed searches there. The wills are there, the orphans court records are there. We do have a microfilm for the early records on all of those. We have the deed indices from 1750 to 1950. But our deeds on microfilm end in 1866. We have the wills into, I think, 1908. So a little longer, more wills were microfilmed. And we have the estate inventories to 1850. County Archives does allow appointments. They're a fabulous facility, and they know those records so well. And they're incredibly helpful, and maybe thinking about things in more traditional ways or other things that could be useful. They're big on conservation. So if it's been scanned or it's on microfilm, they're going to pull those things for you first, because they don't want to pull the original unless they have to. But sometimes they have to just because the quality of the microfilm or what have you. There's a lot of screenshots for the next few slides just to show you they've been actively scanning materials and putting it online. It's fabulous because you can do this at home for free. So this is ccpa.net. So it's the county webpage. This picture changes, but this stays the same. And of course, if you went to this drop down, you can find the clerk of courts or recorder of deeds and get their contact information there. But here we have public records. It's not the most intuitive, so that's why I'm taking through these steps. And then it takes you to this page, and you can click on the archives. Once you get going, it makes sense, and I normally just go through these steps. I'm sure you can bookmark it. Archival holdings. You'll also get on this page their contact information, phone number, email. There's also an about section, which could be useful. To this page, you can browse record groups. And so county records are arranged by office of origin. So kind of those official records. So they're going to be arranged by the office that created them. There is a search bar up in the corner. You can't type in a name there and just get all the records that would come up to that, because I'd be too busy. Now, if you search for taxes or a type of record, it's going to search through that part of the database. The only time a name will come up if it's, that person was a sheriff and we have their sheriff's docket, or a justice of the peace. So there are exceptions. You can search for certain names and look for those dockets. But generally speaking, type of records, so if you want to look for things that involve enslavement, you can type slave, and it would come up. They're going to use the historic term for the records. They're not changing, slave returns to enslavement papers. They're, calling it what they were called to be consistent. And anything that has a camera means that at least some of those records are scanned. Not all of them, but at least some. And so I picked clerk reports as an example. And there's more on this page going down, but there's also several pages of additional records. So there's lots of different clerk report records that are available at the county archives. And I put fast food on, so that would be helpful to people doing genealogy. Each type of record also gives you this lovely description. Sorry. Wonderful description. The run of the records, how big of a collection it is. So that can be really useful. Also, if you're not quite sure if this type of record could be helpful. And then, depending on the record, other inventory or holdings going to be highlighted if you click on that. you get kind of a spreadsheet type of looking screen. Once again, because this is the county and how they're filed, things are going to be arranged by their ID number or their file number. It's how they were filed by the court system or whoever's filing it. But like Excel or something, you can sort differently. So you could say, I want to sort by father's names, and it would make it alphabetical rather than by the year, which might not be helpful, depending on how you're coming at this data, or by the mother's name. And then if it says image, you can click on that, and it'll bring up the document. And then up here, you can see it's a 3-page document. You can page down, you can also scroll down. You also get more information. You know, you can still see that information on the side about kind of synopsis. We have this old printer little thing that's a PDF, and if you click on that, it is a pop-up, so you might get an alert to let it happen. But from that, you can print it out in a nicer file, or you can save that PDF. So if you want to save it or attach it to something else, these are great. They have a lot of records. Obviously, not every record that they want to do. They have the tax records online to about 1830. Forget exactly what year it is, and then hopefully they'll add more. And tax records are a pain to look at, rather than microfilm or just a PDF. They're not searchable, so you're kind of looking through, and the townships aren't necessarily in an order that makes sense. So if you can do that comfortably, because it may take time, especially if you're tracing them over multiple years, it's a great way to do that. We do have indices and transcriptions of tax records in the society as well. So if you're not sure where to look, that can be helpful before you just tackle. If you're not sure where the township to look at, and of course you'll see townships go away as things are breaking off. But there's so many great records available online there. But you'll see a lot like the venue records, estate inventories are not scanned online. There's a lot of records there, you know, tens of thousands of millions of records that are in the archive. So they are a kind of 2-woman show. They both work part-time. So there's a lot of explaining to do, and they're doing an amazing job. And I love that these things are so available to everybody. So a sense of what's available online at the county. But once again, you can always reach out to them as well and visit them. They do send a lot of people that are kind of starting their genealogies our way first, since they're not a research library in the same sense that we are. They're better helping people who are coming in to look for specific documents. And we'll give time, because I'm sure there's other questions or specific things people want to discuss. So I wanted to allow time for questions. Yes.
And you just mentioned inventories and vendor lists and so forth. Are they fairly complete, or would you say not so much?
There are some we know are missing, but there are a lot. Most of them, I'm going to say, exist. Oh, sorry. So the question was, how extensive the state inventories and venues, if they are pretty complete, the collections, and I would say they are. They definitely are missing.
Like 30 years ago, I had researched some that was in the basement of the Register of Wills, and they didn't seem to know where they were at that time, at least the people that worked in that office. So like it was from the late 1700s and what would be Perry County now.
Yeah, so those records eventually came to the society, and they have been rehoused and refoldered. So I don't know if there's been extensive comparison to kind of the little index to see what's missing. We know some are missing, but I'd say a lot of them are there, most of them.
So they're at the county archive?
They are now at the county archives. So they went from the basement to the CCHS and now are at the county archives. But before I started, I think earlier 2000s, they were microfilmed from 1750 to 1850 for what existed. And I know a few have been found since that time. Yes.
I had an ancestor who died at the brother's home for the aged in Huntsville. Is that something that you would have, and the place burned down in the early 50s? And then subsequently that whole home was across the
Sure.
Are you familiar with that name at all? Or?
So the question is about the brother home for the aged that was in Huntsdown. I'm not an expert on that. We might have some things, but I would say we wouldn't have extensive collections on that. I'm not sure.
Is that something that like Messiah?
Messiah might, it's worth reaching out. We don't have a ton of brethren records. So, I mean, other than some cemeteries and things like that. So there could be more. And some of these microfilms things are also available in the state. There's some of, not everything's unique to us, but yes.
What's on the side is the archive of the Brethren in Christ Church, which is different than the Church of the Brethren that has the facility in New Oxford. For Church of the Brethren research, the best place
Yes.
in there is go to Elizabethtown
Yes.
College and see. Now they have mostly published materials there, but they may be able to point you if there are any original records that survive. Where the original records might be. But for Church of the Brethren in this area, the best place to go is Elizabethtown College. You get further west than Genealogy Files has good collection as well.
Yeah, and for Lutheran records was Gettysburg College. Yeah.
That extensive index of church records that is from your organization, is that online?
It is not online currently. And we
Was part of it at one time?
don't think so. At one point they were adamant against putting like anything online. And I'm changing that slowly and we're putting things online. And we didn't know if that would just cause confusion because, you know, people just see arbitrary things and how much can we put online to help people? Because right now, as soon as they read it, they're going to need to contact us to kind of delve deeper. So it's probably something that will be online eventually. I don't know what exactly it'll look like, but it's definitely in conversation because we'd also have to put up the keys. We're definitely, it's kind of in a standstill since we've had big losses as far as the people working on that and kind of figuring where we want it to go. And we cannot put all of those church records online just because some of them are copywritten and things like that. So some of it definitely, and we've scanned a bunch of pages from the Second Presbyterian Church in Carlisle, and we're going to do kind of a beta, the focused curated collection of those records online. An intern that scanned and transcribed a lot of them. He was really into doing that. So we just have to figure out what format we want to take that. So we might be redoing our website. So that's why some of these things are kind of waiting because we don't want to put them up and then have to immediately redo our website.
I know I used them, so I must have used them in person.
Yeah, they originally were just printed out in book form in 3-ring binders, and then they had it available on discs. They eventually made it a database, but then everyone kept using the disc. So we had a technology shift there that didn't work. So now we got to figure out where we want to go with it. But that's a resource that I use definitely multiple times a week. Yes.
What do you want to see done in the future for your society?
Ooh, what do I want to see done in the future for our society? I want to see obviously preservation, but accessibility increases. So our catalog is not online. We have a lot of barriers to access, and not everyone can make it to. I'm sure you get this in New York as well, but just everyone coming into Philadelphia and working their way across the streets, the state. So I did research once for an episode of PDQR. No, did everyone come through there? I'm like, yes. And so many people, and normally in a normal year, we get what I call our genealogy road trips, where if they're working their way, kind of retracing their ancestor steps. Obviously that didn't happen last year. I'm sure some people come down to New York and other places and kind of work their way back. So how can we help people and create an awareness of the history of this area? And I think I'm biased, but it's very important. And not just to the founding of the United States, but a lot of other ways as well. So a lot of important things happened here, and just, you know, people's families and their traditions were nurtured in this area. So helping people make those connections, and so many people like to come back and see where their ancestors lived, and helping them make those connections is something I love doing. So creating better access is definitely something I've been definitely worried about and concerned with and love to see. I'm also working a lot on personally, is genealogical, but bigger than that, and looking at ignored and forgotten histories. Making sure we are looking at the African American history in Cumberland County and some churches that were working like with the Mount Tabor Church and Mount Holly Springs, just listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And the Lincoln Cemetery in Carlisle, which was destroyed, made, well, still cemetery, but stones removed and it was made into a park. So working on those kind of ignored histories and getting that information online as people have left the area. So many people just start by going to Google or their search engine of choice and typing in a name. So what comes up and should come up and when people are searching. So creating awareness, preserving that history, but also making it accessible. And hopefully more people become interested in it too. I get a lot of, I don't know what to do with my records, my kids aren't interested. And then you never know who's going to become interested. I've always worked a little bit on it, but I've never had time to really focus it on my own history. And make copies and shove it in a folder, don't do that. I know I'll come back and file that later. So I have this random binder of things that I at least source it, but it's not organized. And then my mom's brother, who's a retired Army colonel, is the one that has the genealogy book. So surprise. So you never know who's going to get bitten. But getting people those tools, helping people make the connections. I always say lovingly that genealogy is a collaborative effort. But you have a group. So everyone hits walls, and sometimes other previous experience can help other people break down through those walls. So I love, and you never know, and randomly, like people will come in searching like the same name at the same time. Things happen. I don't know, like a bat signal goes up. I don't know. So having people make connections and learn from each other, and not just from us, but I am by no means an expert on everything, and I learned from the people that have come in and have done research in ways that I haven't done. So making those connections as well. Any other questions?
I got one sort of down in the weeds.
Okay.
Okay. When Chambersburg was formed,
Mhm.
it was part of Cumberland.
Yes.
I've been looking for a certain set of records for a long time. And never found anything. Of course, Benjamin Chambers had a land grant for the area. And he created the town and started selling off lots. I'm looking for records of the transfers from Benjamin Chambers to those early lot owners. They're not state records, they're not county records. I can prove there was a transfer and a later chain of title. I'm just looking for those records.
Yeah. And actually that even with, Carlisle had the original lots and then there's the outlots, and sometimes there's maps of that, sometimes there's not. And like for the outlots in Carlisle, I was in them dealing with like a cemetery, and there's like, dozens of them all recorded at the same time, even though, and no reference to when they actually, the years are all off, but like volume RR of the deeds just has a slew of them recorded at the same time. And also the added complication that Cumberland County is lucky when we had the courthouse fire in the 1840s. There was a chain, and all the county records pretty much got out. The borough lost their records, but the county was very lucky. Chambersburg, of course, was mostly destroyed in 1864. So there's the added complication of missing records in Chambersburg. So I'm not sure if that's something that did exist and no longer exists, or where that would be tucked away. But yeah. But yeah, because I would think it'd be in with the land records, but where is it squirreled away?
In some sense, they were Chambers records. They weren't state records or county records or
things like that. Sometimes, at least for Carlisle, which is of course are a little earlier than Chambersburg, there's a lot of records at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. I don't know if there'd be any records
for them there. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of records and back and forth between, the people working for the pens and various things. So HSP has fabulous early collections for Cumberland County. So it might be worth reaching out to them. Anything else? Thank you so very, very much. Please come visit me sometime.
Thank you very much for a very informative program. And with that, we will adjourn.